My name is Suzan Kessel, and we're here today to talk about Mark Shafer, a beloved Fairfield citizen that has just passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And your name is?
Oh, I'm Kathy Tollenaere.
Yes.
And you are, you said your name, I'm sorry.
We've known each other a long
For
time.
a long time.
We've both been president of the Fairfield Art Association, and that's how we got to know Mark.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's how I got to know Mark.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite memories, we moved here in 1979, and I had a 2-year-old and a 5-month-old, so I didn't get out much, and I didn't get around town much. But at some point early on, Mark initiated a Beaux-Art ball for the Art Association, and he had taken life-size pieces of flat corrugated cardboard and drawn all these different, I was going to remember the name.
Just figures?
Just figures and architectural things of the 1920s. Oh. And remember that?
I do.
And so I had no idea where we were when we went to paint those for him. I just remember being upstairs, and there was a hallway with lots of rooms. And I've come to think, in talking to like Chris Bennett the other day, that it was probably above Brown's Pharmacy.
I bet
because
it
that's
was.
where his studio was. And so we painted all those beautiful panels, and then we had a Beaux-Art ball. And there were a bunch of us, and I don't even know where that was because it was a big room and it was dark.
I know we used to have those at the Fairfield Golf and Country Club, and I probably went to that.
Yeah.
And I think we have photos of Mark that he was wearing a Pope outfit.
Well, I know we kind of dressed in flapper costumes, and it was just a lot of fun. And in that I was new to town and only had taken a couple of classes from Chris Bennett and so forth, it was just a fun way to get into the community and meet people. The Art Association was a good way to meet people.
Yes.
And we've read recently that Mark was in on forming their Art Association while he was still in high school.
He was 17 years old, and I was a lot younger and participated in the Art Association. But as a founding member, he stepped forward and he worked with the organization for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. He was a director for a while. He worked on projects. He taught classes.
It was very, very special, for me to get involved, and it was down in the bottom of the basement of the Carnegie Library at the time.
So that's been his home in several different ways.
Yes.
Art Association,
yes.
and then later in
yes.
life, the Carnegie Museum.
And I'm sure he had a lot to say about whose artwork was going to be shown, because every show was a month-long show in the basement. Don Kramer would hang the artwork.
Yeah.
And then some of us would participate by sitting. But, there was always a variety of people's work there, and that was another way to get into the community. Mark had a big, huge impact. When we first moved here, he and Suzan attended the Methodist church. Mark's parents attended the Methodist church, so that's where we were going. And my husband and Suzan were both raised Catholic.
Oh, I didn't know that.
When I think it was 1982, we had a new minister come to the church, and he started a class for younger couples. 40-some years ago, we were all there. So anyway, and so that was when Mark and Suzan came to that Sunday school class, and that was how my husband started coming to that Sunday school class, because he would learn more about what the Methodist denomination was about.
I think it was probably after that, Mark took a trip to Rome.
Yes.
And I think he was very influenced with that, the Vatican and everything related to the Catholic faith.
Right.
And I belonged to the Catholic Church, so he joined that,
yes.
and he really got heavy into painting religious paintings.
And teaching. I know that they went up to Brighton. After they left, they first went to St. Mary's, and then they went on to Brighton for a few years, and that's where he started teaching, I think. And then they came back to St. Mary's.
Okay.
Yeah. But that was my first real meeting with the two of them, which was very special, just because, they both had lots of things to offer to the class,
Yes,
and
Mark, I will miss Mark so much. He would call all the time and say, hey, I've got this great idea. Can we get together and talk?
Oh, neat.
And, that's how the leapfrog probably started, and the William Coop sculpture started. I know certainly with the Lee Gobble sculpture, we brainstormed and Mark just came up with idea after idea. Lee Gobble was quite a character and historical character for Fairfield. So he had all the knowledge. I don't know where he got it all, but he had it.
Yeah, Lee Gobble's parents actually came from Abington, Bogus, and they had a store over there, and then they came to Fairfield. So they were long-time residents.
Yeah, so Mark
so there's a lot of history there.
appreciated the history.
Right.
He integrated art with history,
Right.
with everything, and he had a gift.
I'm glad you brought that up. There for a little while, he was doing the corncob paintings, like the corncob Victorian of the schoolhouse. We still call it a little bit the schoolhouse.
Yes, we do.
And then the Venice picture around the square, the town square, there, with the gondola and the corn in it.
And he also went to Venice when he traveled, so I'm sure that influenced him also.
Absolutely. And so it was about that time that I asked him if he would teach my two children a little bit of a, give them some hints and have an art lesson in the summertime. And that was a very special time. And they came home with corncob pictures.
What a treasure. I know my son Alex adored Mark Shafer. He was just a wonderful teacher. And on Facebook, some of the things that people were saying after he passed away were very, very students he had, how he made a difference in their lives.
Could you find a kinder person? I mean, really, you never heard him talk negatively about anything, and even his physical handicap, he never brought that up. In fact, I'm not sure, I barely noticed it, for a very long time.
You didn't.
Right.
But he had polio.
Yeah.
From about 5 years on, and it came back on him really strong about 15 years ago. And I know I would watch him draw, and I had the opportunity, I had his sketchbook to include in the Fairfield Art Association exhibit, a painting that he was doing from the sketchbook. And he had to have turned the sketchbook different directions to do different things. And he made it all amazing.
He wasn't afraid to try something different.
No.
Yeah.
And everyone knows his quirkiness. When I hung a show of his, he had a nail sticking out from behind that made the picture stick out from the wall, and it made it go like that. And I tried to straighten it, and he goes, no, 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 it needs to go like that. So he liked the quirkiness that he could add in whatever way.
Right. I think he was a born teacher, getting back to the teaching. Really, he had the patience, and he was empathetic. When you've gone through some kind of a hardship, you gain an empathy for other people that are going through things. So, he had an empathy for people in general, and I can't say that anybody was never a friend.
Right.
So, yeah.
He was amazing. And I said before, he was limited with his abilities, but he was unlimited.
Right.
With what he could do. There was no limit.
His mind, he was brilliant. He had what a love of history that he inherited from his parents, and the family, but he loved it, and he retained it, and he shared it, in so many different ways. At the museum, he's done things recently with help with Dick DeAngelis's movies in the historical aspects, and he actually, maybe 4 or 5 years ago when the second movie came out, he had not even known that Fairfield had been instrumental in the Underground Railroad at that time because we were
Mark
sitting.
didn't.
No, Mark did not.
Okay.
He said he was really embarrassed to be from Fairfield because he didn't think that anybody participated in the Underground Railroad. But it's since surfaced.
Well, and then he came up with a display in the
yes,
museum
yes.
featuring that.
Yeah, but what really was good for him was to find all those things. And there are still homes in Fairfield that maybe they were part of it, but the historical aspect of the people in the community, they were either really for slavery or really against, so it had to be very secret. So he wouldn't have known, yeah.
I'm sure that was very important to Mark once he found that out, and he felt obligated to tell that story of history and through art. I'm sure he included art in that project.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, a lot. And the Juneteenth, it was so hot that day, some of the plans couldn't be carried out the way he had intended, but still, it's a wonderful day. And it was, I mean, I just put a feather in his hat, because it turned out so well.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Some of his drawings are just, they interpret like the religious. He would read verses and interpret every bit of a verse, and it would take him hours to paint. And when he did that, I know he would call or find out about friends that were struggling or a family issue, someone ill, and he would offer up his painting for the person. And hours, he would get up in the middle of the night too, I know, and paint. So
it was always a treat to get an email with, some of the previews that are coming along and how the changes happen. And I think he shared with a lot of us.
He did. He would send pictures, text them to us, many people, and just show the progress of what this is becoming and this is becoming in the picture.
One time he told me that he used to do more portraits when he first started. And then as time went on, his art evolved. And so, I mean, you can spot a Mark Shafer from a mile away now. He just can tell his brush strokes and his subject material and so forth. But you brought up the idea of his whimsy. And I just have a story I want to share. Several years ago, he did a painting for a niece that she wanted leghorn chickens in this painting. And so he gave that to her when it was done. But then later in an art show, he had prints made of that painting. He cut them and made it into quarters. And so those quarters were placed in the art show because those were prints.
I didn't know it was one painting cut into 4 pieces.
And so I just loved that. And then he did the big tower painting in the museum. If you haven't been to the museum, people need to go down there. It's on 3rd floor, and you'll see it immediately. But it's a real tall painting of the light tower that was in the square until the early 1920s, and they had to take it down. But birds were running into it at night because the light was so bright, and they weren't used to that, in the late 1800s, who had electricity?
Yeah,
and
Fairfield was the first.
Yes. So he did this painting, and it's got, some birds of all different styles falling to the ground.
As only Mark could do.
I know. And there was a lady with her umbrella, and he knew who it was. I can't tell you, that fending off the cats from the birds that had landed on the ground. So he made prints of that painting, and I said, "Oh, Mark, I would love to have a print." Well, I'd been working down at the museum a lot, and he said, "I would love to give you a print, but how about at my cost?" And I said, "Sure." So I paid him for that, and so I've got a nice print in my room. And then a few days later, he called, and he said, "Kathy, what kind of birds would you like in this painting?" And I hardly hesitated at all. I said, "How about white leghorn chickens?" And so my print has Mark Shafer's white leghorn printers in the town square. I mean, chickens in the town square. Is that a riot or what? So that's special to me.
That's another way Mark was so thoughtful. He would, just this Christmas, I got a Christmas card from him, and instead of writing deer,
Oh, yeah.
he creates a deer with the antlers and the leg jumping through the Christmas card,
yeah.
and he just included his art in his Christmas cards, and he was just so creative. His mind was always going, being clever. He used to create words of his own. When he was working on the gobble sculpture, he was working on neckties, and he painted them in the shape of a turkey fan for the sculpture out in front of the Arts and Convention Center. And he started referring to the necktie paintings. He finally just called them necktiles. Necktiles instead of tiles of neckties. And it just became a common word. And I think he did that with a lot of things. There is so much to know and love about Mark. I hope that we continue. I hope that maybe we have a project or two in our community to keep Mark's alive. His history, his story,
And
his
just
art,
his legend.
his legend. He was a Renaissance man in Fairfield because he knew everything about everything, and he shared it in a loving way and through his art.
Absolutely.